Welcome back to Perkins Pipes. Sometimes I bring out a pipe that really connects with the topic, right? Not always, but probably most of the time. I try to match the pipe in some way to the topic of the video. This time, there is absolutely no connection between the pipe and the topic of the video. I just wanted to smoke this little Missouri Meerschaum, Missouri Pride corncob pipe. This was my first, and it is my only corncob pipe. I did get a hardwood Missouri Meerschaum that a friend gave me, but this is my only corncob, and I just hadn't smoked this guy for a while, and what the hey, I want to smoke him again. So, what are we talking about today? Something that is absolutely extraordinary. As always, though, let's get this guy lit. Let's get to talking. Got a little bit of nasties in there. There we go. Back in, let's see, I guess it would have been November of 2024, some news came out. And there were a lot of other things happening in November of 2024, if you paid attention. And this one kind of got swallowed up by various other items in the news. But truth be told, this is one of the biggest deals, truly. An ancient mosaic was put on, was loaned to the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., where it will be through July of 2025. And because this made it to the Museum of the Bible, I think that's why there was the big deal in at least some of the news. This mosaic, which I'm going to be showing you a picture of here in a moment, was discovered beneath an Israeli prison in Megiddo in around 2003 to 2005. This is being excavated and uncovered and dug up. So about 20 years later, here it comes to the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. in the United States. And what's made this so interesting is some of the Greek words that are in the mosaic. Now, I'm going to be talking some pretty heavy-duty religious stuff here, although I will say I think this is of interest to the historian as well as to the person of faith, especially Christian faith. One of the core tenets of the Christian faith is that Jesus is God, fully human. Okay. Doesn't matter, Catholic, Orthodox, various stripes of Protestant. This is core Christian belief. Yet nowhere in the New Testament do you ever see the sentence, Jesus is God. You never have a quotation from Jesus saying, I am God. And you say, well, then maybe this isn't biblical. It is. Perfectly biblical. It's just that it's never stated quite that way. For example, if you go to the first chapter of the Gospel of John in the New Testament, chapter 1, verse 1, you find the sentence, in the beginning, the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Hang on to that thought. Scroll down a few verses later, verse 14, you get the line, and the Word became flesh and lived among us. All right. Well, we know that the Word becoming flesh, that's a reference to Jesus. You put that together, though, with verse 1, the Word was God, the Word became flesh and lived among us. We know that's Jesus. Well, Jesus must be God. Okay? At one point you have Jesus saying, before Abraham was, I am. Well, either that is a monstrously bad grammatical error on Jesus' part. Before Abraham was, I am. Any grammarian is going to take a red pen to that and say, bad grammar. Or Jesus is making a reference to himself as God. Remember when Moses was talking with God, and God says, hey, you got to go to Pharaoh, tell him let my people go. And Moses says, well, whom shall I say has sent me? And God says, you tell Pharaoh, I am sent you. Right? I am Yahweh. Fundamental name for God. Okay? So Jesus says that. Plus, you've got all the other things, and the Jewish leaders clearly recognize the claims that Jesus was making when he's going around forgiving sins, and they say, hey, only God can forgive sins. Well, here's Jesus forgiving sins. You put 2 and 2 together. But that's the thing of it. You have to put 2 and 2 together. You have to know some of the aspects of history. You have to know some aspects of Jewish faith to get these references in the New Testament. Nowhere does it state explicitly in so many words, Jesus is God. Okay? Well, you go along and you get to 325 AD. You get the Council of Nicaea, from which we get the Nicene Creed. A few years later, there's the Council of Constantinople, and it's revised, and the creed that we often refer to as the Nicene Creed is really the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed. Big title, right? But it's the cliff notes. It's the core essence of Christian belief. And in it, we find right toward the beginning, where the faithful Christian says, I believe in Jesus Christ, God from God. Then there's another little blurb, light from light. And then it comes back again, true God from true God. Okay? So you've got this explicit statement now. This is what Christians believe. They believe that he is God from God. And just to underscore it, true God from true God. Okay? What is so cool about this Mosaic is that it dates to 230 AD. Okay? So about 100 years, we'll say, before the Nicene Creed. And there is an explicit statement that Jesus is God in this Mosaic. So let me go ahead and I'm going to bring it up here side by side. I'm going to kind of walk you through some pretty nerdy Greek grammatical stuff here, along with the history and all that jazz. So we think that this was part of maybe some prayer hall. It wasn't a church, but it's some sort of a Christian building. And there's a Greek woman named Akeptus who apparently had dedicated a table to be used in this space. And people often would put their names on things, not unlike we do that today. But in the Mosaic, it has her name, and she dedicated this table. And whether she bought the table, had the table made, don't necessarily know about that, but she dedicated the table to God Jesus Christ. It's very, very clear, and I'm going to show you how clear it is. To God Jesus Christ. So let's take a look here. In the part that I have circled, there are 6 Greek letters. Theta, omega, with a line over the top. Then iota, upsilon, with a line over the top. followed by chi omega with another line over the top. Now, the line is actually important. The line indicates an abbreviation. In English, we use a dot or a period as an indicator of abbreviation, right? If something happened at 9:45 a.m., right? A period, M period. That's an abbreviation for us. So the line over the top indicated an abbreviation in Greek. And we see this in mosaics. We see it in manuscripts. We see it in Greek. We see it in Latin. The line over the top as a means of abbreviating words. And all of those are very common words. And so if you're talking about a Christian facility, the words God, Jesus, and Christ are going to be very common words. So anybody would have seen that abbreviation, completely understood what this is. So the theta omega is short for theta epsilon omega. The iota upsilon is short for iota, eta, sigma, omicron upsilon. And then the chi omega is short for chi, rho, iota, sigma, tau, omega. And you're going, okay, Steve, wait for the pun. You're speaking Greek to me. Well, yeah, I am. Theo means God. That next word, Yesu, and you can kind of hear it, is Jesus. And Christo, again, you can kind of hear it, is Christ. A similarity between Latin and Greek is that the noun endings change depending on how they are being used. And my even first-year Latin students could understand this part. We talk about this in Latin. Those three words in the Greek are in what we call the dative case, D-A-T-I-V-E. And dative case is often used for indirect object. Okay? I bought my sister a book. I bought what? A book. Book is the direct object. I bought the book for what? My sister. Right? Or I gave my sister a book. I gave what? I gave the book. I gave the book to what? My sister. So in both of those sentences, sister would be the indirect object. And then in Greek or Latin, that would be in what we call the dative case. So this woman I kept this, she dedicated the temple, and then these words are in the dative case, to God Jesus Christ. So it's right there, clear as day, 230 AD, people were explicitly acknowledging Jesus as God. Okay. And you say, well, what's the big deal about this? Well, when this article was coming out in late 2024, people were saying, this actually is as big a discovery. In fact, it's probably the biggest discovery since the Dead Sea Scrolls in terms of knowledge about early Christianity and how people understood Jesus and who Jesus was, who Jesus is. And let's talk about why this really is such a big deal. One of the things that sometimes gets said is that, well, you Christians have just made stuff up over time. Back in the day, nobody thought of Jesus that way. Well, this proves that wrong. Right? So as early as 230 AD, people were acknowledging Jesus as God. And from a historical perspective, we would say this is right from the beginning. Now, clever folks out there are going to say, from the beginning? This is 200 years after Jesus died. What are you talking about from the beginning? That's a lot of time that has passed. And to that I would argue no. You and I live in a world in which 5 years ago, things were so much different from how they are today. 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Things changed so much, so fast. Hairstyles and clothing styles and, of course, technology, right? Everything is changing so fast. And so you go, oh my goodness, 200 years of change, and that's a huge block of time. But you got to remember that throughout antiquity, and as you're moving into later antiquity, and then after antiquity into, the Middle Ages, and even in the Renaissance, time did not move as fast as it does for us. And you say, no, wait a minute. Still 60 seconds in a minute, right? 60 minutes in an hour? Yeah, but there wasn't the rapid change. Honestly, in terms of the way people interacted in the world, what was the difference between 30 AD and 230 AD? Not a lot. Really, not a lot. What was the difference between the year 1124 and 1224? Not a lot. So when we say this happened in 230 AD and we call that really, really early, it was because things just didn't change as fast as we experience them now. So really, this is rightly considered a very early expression of the divinity of Jesus Christ. Now, here's where we go into a little bit more of the faith aspect of all this. Okay, what does all this matter? Well, if you're already a believer, you say, that doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. I already believe that Jesus is God. Isn't it nice, though? Isn't it nice to see what our early brothers and sisters said and did? I think just historically it's interesting. It's also a bit of proof for those who like to think about such things and argue in such ways. For people who say, you Christians added a bunch of stuff, you can say, actually, no. You can see this very early on. So you can use it as some evidence, if you will, some proof, if you will, in terms of apologetics and evangelism. Now, ultimately, whether you believe that Jesus is God, that's between you and Jesus. All right, you remember what Jesus said to the disciples. He says, who do you guys think that I am? And Peter says, well, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says, yeah, you didn't get that from human beings. He says, man didn't reveal that to you. He says, that was revealed to you by my Father in heaven. So ultimately, what you believe and the depth of it, your faith is rooted in something that is transcendent. It's rooted in revelation. But it's always neat to have those hard pieces of evidence and archaeological evidence, textual evidence, and things of that nature. So, just curious, had you heard of this? When this news came out back in 2024, had you heard about the Megiddo Mosaic? And this earliest reference to Jesus as God. Have you ever been to the Museum of the Bible? I've got to be honest, we have not been to the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. Would love to go sometime. I don't know if we'll get there before this is gone in July of 2025. Maybe we will. I'd sure love to see it. But if you've ever been there, talk to us about that. What do you think about archaeological discoveries like this and matters of faith? As Malcolm Guite likes to say, I do these little things in order at last to do nothing. Or as I like to say in Latin, Parva ago ut tandem nihil agam. Have a wonderful day.